Hello and welcome to the show with your hosts, Pedro Richey and Brett Jennings. We're here to present to you crypto news, real estate news, and mortgage news, and talk to you about what's going on in the world. And today, because we're old goats, we've seen change coming, and we always ask ourselves, why didn't I not know what would happen if this happened? So if there's going to be a dollar change, or there's going to be some rival to the dollar, where would that put me 2 years from now? Where could I invest in that would protect my assets? Where could I make money? What could I do now? I mean, let's face it, if we all knew in 2009 and 10 that Bitcoin would blow up, we would all kept our shit.
I mean, and that's funny that you say that, because I'm sure, like me, you know people who bought Bitcoin when it was 10 cents, when it was $2, when it was whatever it was. And I tell these to people who aren't into cryptocurrency, who have never bought Bitcoin, and they say, wow, those people must be gazillionaires. And I said, it doesn't work like that, because if you bought Bitcoin at 25 cents, when it hit $500, you sold most of it, right? Like, no way did you buy Bitcoin at even $100 and think someday in like 5 years or 6 years, this is going to hit $60,000. This is going to hit $30,000. Never in a million years. So I'm sure there are some that held on to a lot of it. I'm sure there's even more that still have a little bit from that initial. But for the most part, a lot of people, it doesn't work like that, right? You buy something at $1 and it hits $1,000. Why would you not sell a lot of it? You're going to know it's going to go to 65,000, which nothing's ever done.
Well, you hear, some of these influencers now, they're starting like, what's his name? I Am George guy.
Yeah. I Am George.
Yeah, he's got this podcast. I listen to him.
Okay.
I kind of like the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he was talking about $12 million Bitcoin. At least that was his teaser, right? And you hear all of these on Twitter, for example, all of these guys saying it's going to go to 60 million, it's going to go here, it's going to go there. Now, let's hope.
It's not like I'm not in favor of that.
Yeah. But like you said, if you bought it at, let's say $1 and it went to 500, you get a 500x. Why wouldn't you cash out?
Why wouldn't you cash out at least a lot of it?
Right.
Like, that's what people don't understand, which is hindsight, right? Nobody knew that Bitcoin was going to do what it did, because nothing's ever done that kind of X, let alone in that short amount of time. And it's funny because it's the same thing. Like, a lot of Twitter, or a lot of crypto is on, Twitter, and people on there all the time are going back and forth, arguing about this and that. And I find it all funny in a sense, because we're so early with this and its place in the world, that to say it's going to do this and it's not going to do that, how do any of us that know that? That's like going back to 1994 and saying, oh, the internet's going to do this, and you're going to have Facebook, and you're going to have, there's no way anybody can determine what's going to happen between now and then, other than it has a future and a place in the future of what it is. So it's supply and demand. Is it going to go to 16 million? Supply and demand. If the world says it's so valuable and so rare that they'll give it value to it, then yes. But it cannot as well. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not going to always be a demand for it personally. And you're like me, I feel Bitcoin's going to be the standard, in a sense, digital gold backing everything, or some form of everything, or at least correlate with other backings of things with the banking system and everything else. But regardless, what's that going to be? Is that going to be $1 million? Is that going to be 16 million? Is it going to be 100,000? Keep in mind that 21 million Bitcoin will only ever be created. And even if that 21 million was all created, you wouldn't even have one full Bitcoin for every millionaire in the world. So It comes down to the adoption of it.
Right. And that's just it.
Where's that going to go, man? Who knows? That's my whole point. People want to make predictions. It's like, how can you? So you're telling me that 10 years ago, Bitcoiners knew it was going to get 65,000. BS.
Right.
You know?
I don't think anyone knew.
No, there's no way you could. So to say that something that has, it's the same thing when people talk about charting. Oh, the last bear market compared to this bull market. Every time there's a new adoption level into that. Every time there's new kind of money in that. How can you tell what's going to happen? I mean, you can base it a little semblance of in the past, but I don't think you can apply like normal charting to it in a sense like you would stock with GE or Ford or something like that, because it's what, a 9-year trading history, a 10-year trading history? I mean, and the adoption level is so different every time. How can you tell me that, you know? So I just find it kind of funny that people, and they get in some good banter back and forth, but.
So where do you think it's going to go now? I mean, we're cresting 30.
We just crossed 30. I think it's going to, I think we've definitely, personally, I think we've started the next bull run, but I think we're very early in it. And I think there's going to be a lot of sideways action and a few pretty good drops. I mean, remember, what was it, in June or July, summer of, I think, 2019, which was still the bear market for the last cycle. Bitcoin was at like 7,000 or 8,000 and it went up to like 14,000 in a matter of like 3 or 4 days. And then went back down again. So I think it's going to play a little bit like that. I mean, you might have a drop down to 22,000, 20,000, I don't see some people on there saying it's going to go down to 10,000. I think it's already past that. I think the sentiment has already changed past that. And let's be frank, the whole banking system of what's happening right now, with fractionalized banking, reserve banking, all that, that definitely helped propel Bitcoin to kind of get started. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? Where do you think we're at right now? Where do you think we're going to be 6 months?
I've been trying to figure that out. And
$1 million question.
Well, you remember when Bitcoin hit 15 going to 14?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I got rid of my Bitcoin at about 42, 43. And so now I'm looking to get back in, right? Mm-hmm. So I figured I'd wait till it gets to 14, 13, 12, 10. And it went up. And you want to talk about having a man moment, But I'm still up 12G.
Yeah.
So I'm not that mad at it, right? I'm one of those that I thought I'd always be a hodler,
Yeah.
I'd always hold that.
So that idea sounds good. And everyone wants to wear it like a badge of honor. But in reality, I know what you mean.
Well, so now that I'm sitting, with some cash, looking to get back in, I'm watching what's going on in the geopolitical realm. I'm watching the U.S. basically bullying crypto.
100%.
Yeah. And the SEC, I think, is going to make a change. I think leadership will be shuffled.
They have to. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest.
And that is going. If it is, then there's going to be a run. Yeah. I think Bitcoin will go up, but I don't know if it'll be lasting. That's the thing. We're watching what happened with Bitcoin now, and my guess is the reason it ran was the use case for Bitcoin was proven. So what do I mean by that? Okay. Well, when Satoshi wrote his white paper to introduce blockchain technology via peer-to-peer transfer of assets, just to get away from the banks, he envisioned this then, 2009, I believe.
Look at the Genesis block, the timestamp in the Genesis block.
Right. So what I see is people realized that their assets weren't safe. And the banks, I don't think they invested poorly. You can't convince me that Signature Bank in New York, I believe, that they did anything wrong. I mean, you've got sitting senators, that were on their board. They were heavily invested, right?
So stop right there. Say that again, because I don't think most people understand that. Say that again.
Well, I'm trying to remember his name, but you've got the guy that did the Dodd-Frank Act, one of the two. I don't remember who it was, right off the giddy up. I could look it up and fact check it later, guys. But
Barney Frank?
Well, I think it was...
Or one of the main component people of it, writers of it. Okay.
It might have been Barney. Let's just say it was.
Okay.
So he loved that bank. He was sitting on the bank, and they were all making sure that they were placing correct bets. And where did they go wrong? And they went wrong in what I'm guessing is that they backed crypto. They were one of the 5 banks that backed crypto. So what did they do wrong? Well, according to them, they were insolvent because of their positions. If they were to liquefy, they would lose a lot of money. And where would they lose the money? They would lose their money. They bet on the U.S. Treasury. They bought them at 1, 2, 3%. And now, if they have to liquefy them, there's no buyers, so they would have to sell at an extreme discount. And then they place bets in commercial real estate. And commercial real estate right now is in a major bubble, as per the experts. And what is that bubble? Well, a lot of these people don't understand. They look at their mortgage and say, oh, well, I got a 30-year, I got nothing to worry about. Well, that's not true in commercial. Most commercial loans are between 5 and 7 years, from what I understand. Okay? So they have to refinance. So what's going on now, a lot of these commercial entities are facing either they keep what they have and go to an ARM, a variable loan, or they just simply refinance into today's rates. The problem is they can't afford it because their vacancy factors are horrific.
Yeah.
This trend that happened in 2020 where you would have everyone going home because of COVID, right? And so a lot of people decided to stay home. A lot of people actually went and moved to the Midwest.
I'm from Wisconsin, and one of my relatives listed their house outside of Madison, Wisconsin for like $450,000, and it sold for $510,000.
Wow.
And for that to happen in Wisconsin, I've never seen.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's but you're right. I mean, it's crazy. And I think when you talk about that adoption of people not working from home and doing everything distant, like through Zoom, that was what, 5 or 6 years worth of advanced technology in a matter of 2 weeks that people adopted.
Right.
And I think that right now, that's really propelled Bitcoin to its second coming right now, which is with the whole bank thing. I think that the banks and getting insolvent and what's happening right now and people realizing about fractionalized banking, I think that's taking the adoption and the understanding of the use case of Bitcoin and really turning it on to people's eyes and accelerating the adoption of it because the banks are forcing the hand on it, I think.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, let's look at the other white meat, right? Which is Silicon Valley Bank.
Ah,
right?
Yeah.
So why did they go after Silicon Valley Bank? What do you think?
Well, I mean, because of their involvement with crypto, but they're no more insolvent than all these other banks, but they are in a sense picked on, right?
Right.
So that's my opinion.
Well, it's a
I
good
think I'm
one.
probably right.
I think you're right. Well, what they have in common is that they supported crypto, but Silicon Valley was very special. Not any more special than the other ones, but they represented a group that was supposedly a protected class in the banking world, which is the democratic, liberal wing, the alphabets, if you would.
Yep.
And they decided to sink that ship. And for them to sacrifice one of their own is telling.
That's a good point. People don't understand in a sense, well, I'm not going to call it in a sense, the war right now that the government's trying to create with crypto, even going after layer 2s, staking, any form of the technology. And that's the thing, which is, I can understand a government's problem with Bitcoin because it challenges their currency. I totally get that. But the technology, the blockchain, that's facilitating all these other things and the future of how businesses, and every single business is going to be connected with blockchain. And just the good that blockchain does for transparency and facilitating things and safety, they are lumping them all into one category and shoving them all out the door. And that cannot be good, man.
Yeah. And and that's just it. I agree. I mean, Brett, Silicon Valley was an artery.
Yeah.
And a lot of these angel investors had their money there. What was also telling was that all of the depositors were made whole. And I want to know why. I get the fact that if you had $250,000 approved by the FDIC, and then they would be able to get that. But they say that the average deposit was $2.2 or $2.4 million, the average deposit. These are no joke, people.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked myself this question: why were they made whole? And on one side of the equation, you're looked at as a bad guy because, the government should make everyone whole, right?
Yeah.
And they say stuff like, well, when the FDIC was done, it was 100 years ago, and they used to do it for $100,000, and $100,000 back then was over $1 million, and blah 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 worth today. But didn't in 2009 a lot of people lose their shirts, and they weren't made whole? All these little community banks and business banks, whatever, they went under, and those people weren't made whole. What is going on? What's the difference? Well, the difference is that these are good old boys. These are a protected class. But they didn't protect the bank. The bank that, in my opinion, didn't really do anything wrong. And I read this tweet, and I'll paraphrase it. And the tweet said that 168 other banks are worse than Silicon Valley Bank.
Yes, I saw that. And then that's what I'm talking about is they've literally, these banks that we're talking about right now have done nothing worse than all these other banks that are just sitting there. Why were they picked on? What's the one common denominator?
They were crypto banks.
There you go.
But then there was the case of the first bank. Do you remember who the first bank that went out? You remember the name of it? There was.
I thought Silicon Valley was the first one.
No. You've got Silvergate.
That's it.
Yeah, it took me a second.
Silvergate.
Yeah. So Silvergate.
Yes.
Went out, and that was the first crypto bank they attacked. It's also the smallest one. But why did Silvergate get trashed? They had $100 billion in assets or whatever craziness it was. And they started with them because they were an easy target. They were little, right? And they were a 24-hour service for a lot of the exchanges to conduct their business. Yeah. And they have it's a proprietary software that now, because it's in bankruptcy, is now up for sale. And guess who the buyer is on that?
Would that be the government?
No.
Who?
It's J.P. Morgan Chase.
Oh, well, close enough. Same thing, kind of.
Yeah. The way it worked is, let's say you have an exchange, right? And you get requests for cash, right? So you're going to send them over the cash to their account. Well, how do you get cash as an exchange? And that's the problem that Silvergate handled. So what they would do is they would give liquidity 24 hours a day to these exchanges. And they have this proprietary software. It's a defunct company. All their assets are up for sale. And J.P. Morgan Chase is going after that software.
Think you will take the software. That's
why.
Well, I know. So I have a good friend that I golf with every week who's a cloud architect for Microsoft. He's been in the space for a minute or two and used to work with proprietary software for banks for a bunch of years. And he always laughs at Ripple because he's like, I know the technology works. It works very well. But he's like, you don't understand the way that banks work. They will never allow someone else's technology. They're going to let someone else invent it and then come in and buy it, like this case, or they're just going to take and clone it and create their own version of it and then use that. And that's what banks do. So, funny is, speaking of kind of fall back a little bit, I was looking at Twitter yesterday, and Gary Gensler, which is the SEC chair, taught MIT blockchain at MIT years ago before he ever became SEC chair. And there's a minute clip in there that you look at in his lecture, and he talks about how I just kind of want to give a warning to everybody. And if you do want to pursue with blockchain and it does start to become, Bitcoin does start to become money, basically he said it's in your best interest to basically split half of everything you're going to make with the banks, or bring in the government and basically give them a large portion of anything that you're going to make. And if you go about that way, you're going to have a lot more success. Basically saying that the only way for the technology that I'm teaching you about, and I'm explaining to you how awesome it is and how it works, the only way that's really going to be impactful in life, that can really be brought into real world use, is if you partner up with the powers that be right now. Which I understand in a sense, but then where's that line? And then once you start conceding to that, what's going to say they just don't continue to take over?
I think you're right, dude. I think, this guy, what traces back to him is unavoidable. Sam Bankman-Fried has been in bed with this guy for a long time. Their family ties run deep. I don't know, because I wasn't there. I don't know what the conversations were about. It's just hella suspicious if you look at the scenario. Here you have this young man that has ties to some very influential people through his parents who are politically tied. And he gets funded from some unknown source to trade Bitcoin on a Japanese exchange with a spread, a very generous spread. So he would buy it here and he would sell it basically to the Japanese, and the guy was making $1 million.
Like arbitrage trading.
He was making about $1 million a freaking day, and then it became stupid money, right? So
I didn't realize he was making like $1 million a day.
it was stupid
That's
money.
what FTX was set up, was for basically professional arbitrage trading in a sense, right?
Well, no, Alameda first.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Right. So Alameda was set up. But if you look at, you just start connecting the dots. All right. So here you have Gary, our boy, at the SEC. right? And he was at MIT. And who was there? Sam and girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
And then the political connections, and then all of a sudden, all this money comes in. Because look, if I had stupid money like that I could make money on the like you're saying, arbitrage trading or spread trading or whatever, right? And I could buy Bitcoin in the U.S., turn around and sell it somewhere that it's maybe prohibited by a government, let's call it, soon to be India or wherever, and people are wanting to buy it on the black market. Dude, there's no amount of money I can't make, but I just need the backing.
Yeah.
So the question is, where did this fool get the money? That's not answered, right? And then when he does end up making the money, where did the money go? And it went to pay all these favors, all these politicians. So basically, on most of the money went to the Democrats, but a lot too went to the Republicans, right? And so, why? That's the question. Why did he do that? Well, the only reason that you would donate that kind of money, we're talking hundreds of millions, right? Why would you donate that kind of money unless you wanted to wield power, right?
That's exactly what money like that does.
Right. So did you ever read Rockefeller's book? I think it was called Titan. No. Someone did a book about Rockefeller. They call it Titan. I don't remember. It was years ago. But in a quote in there, Rockefeller said that all of competition is a sin. And so the reason I bring that up is, think about it. If you got FTX and they were starting to buy all of these Three Arrows, all these, defunct companies, if they start going under his fold and he's figured out a way so he can make money through both of these entities that he owns, and he starts buying off political favors, I'm not saying that the people that receive the money are bad people. What I'm saying is that people donate that kind of money to wield power. I mean, for Pete's sake.
That's a common sense thing.
Yeah.
And people don't need to understand the whole start of FTX's downfall was because of this maneuver. People need to understand that it all started with CZ from Binance, which is the largest crypto exchange in the world. Binance was one of the first and main investors into FTX. CZ catches word on the grapevine that Sam Bankman-Fried is going around to the U.S. government and doing everything in his power to have laws changed so that they all favor FTX exchange and they disfavor everything else and push all the other exchanges out, including Binance. So think about this. You help a startup get going. You're their first investor and you give them hundreds of millions of dollars and get them going, to find out later that they're going behind your back trying to get laws changed so that you're excluded and it's only them.
Crazy.
So that's when CZ found that out from Binance and said, cool. I'm not saying that FTX is a fraud. All I'm saying is I'm taking all my money out and I'm telling the world. And then everybody started saying, why are you taking all your money out? Well, it just so happens because of this. And then it all started and then the exposure started happening. But it's because of Sam doing that and trying to cut out his competition and going around with exactly what you're saying, taking that money then and giving it to politicians to have things roll into his favor. I mean, of course, you're not saying they're bad people, but we all know what money like that being donated does and why it's being donated. We're not stupid, no one's stupid.
Right. Well, if you look at why bank runs happen, and this is what Sam didn't realize, most of your deposits that you put in are leveraged, okay? And so what the bank does, it basically puts you in a situation where you become an investor to the bank.
Yep.
Okay.
They loan your money out.
Uh-huh. And the rules vary, but in general, what they do is when they loan the money out, granted, for the most part, bankers are very conservative, and all that. But when they loan it out and to get interest or whatever, of which you receive almost nothing for, okay, what ends up happening is if a run comes, in other words, a rumor, like J.P. Morgan Chase, the original, started rumors and basically got rid of banks at whim, okay? I mean, back in the day. We don't have to go there. So now what happened in crypto was a rumor will destroy crypto just as it does destroy a bank. Because unfortunately, and this is where the problem with Sam comes in with, he wasn't supposed to be leveraging the crypto.
That's when people started looking, and that's the whole thing. It was that first part that made people open their eyes and start looking. And once they started looking, it wasn't that they didn't have to look that far to find out that, yes, the money that was supposed to be sitting there was taken and spent.
How was it taken? Basically, what they did was they went ahead and through Alameda, they grabbed their assets and got loans against their assets at very favorable prices.
So they created their own lending branch and then lended against themselves.
Well, that and
in a sense. But
then what they would do is they would leverage that.
Yes.
Okay, and then they would sell it package it for banks. Okay, exactly how it all works. I mean, I guess I could have a podcast explaining that once I brush up again. But at the end of the day, what ended up happening was they got their assets. They sent them to Alameda. Alameda turned around and packaged the asset and either created a coin against that asset. So whatever it was, they weren't really into Bitcoin, So whatever assets they owned at the time.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is one of the assets that they held was SHIB, and they had stupid amounts of SHIB.
Oh, I bet, man.
Billions and billions of SHIB. And so I think it was like 45% of their portfolio. I think what they were betting on is that the SHIB would have a Dogecoin event.
Yeah.
I think that's what they were betting on. And it may have happened because what they were doing is they were running up the market on many different platforms in many different ways. But what ended up happening when the rumors started, okay, you had a run and they could not absorb the run. They weren't liquid enough to absorb it. So they had to start selling. And then they just couldn't come. So they went to Binance, and they basically tried to get in bed with them. All right, say, hey, look, bail us out. We need $500 million or whatever the case was. And I think what was his name against Jay-Z or CZ? CZ. I always forget his acronym.
Don't ask me how he pronounced the real.
But whatever. I think he screwed up. His ego got in the way. I think what he would have screwed up. I think he screwed up. His ego got in the way. I think what he probably would have been better served to start slowly over a period of a couple months.
I agree.
Liquidating his asset and then have the run. But what he did was he actually got stuck with a lot of those FTX coins that were traded on his exchange. And
I don't think he realized what he started, like the fall of it all.
Well,
you know
what happens to a lot of guys? They put people around them that are yes men.
Yeah.
So here he is, a billionaire, all right, developed one of the best exchanges worldwide, and basically thinks his shit don't stink. So he has all these people, all right, around him that are telling him he's a god, right? Where, you have great examples in history. I think it was Aurelius a Roman emperor, he had a slave that would basically all day remind him that he's just a human. You're just human. Why? Because he had so many quote unquote worshipers. And back in the day, everyone considered you a god if you were in a certain station, right? And so the guy would just remind him constantly, dude, you're just human. You're just human. You're not, don't take this. You're just a man. You're just a man. And brilliant, right? Brilliant advice. And I think he would have been better served having guys like us.
Well, absolutely. Problem is, he won't listen to guys like us.
Telling him,
you gotta have a certain portfolio to get in the room with that guy.
I mean, you know what?
Yeah.
I give him props,
listen. Look how much ego has gotten the best of them all. I mean, history's literally written with it. I mean, we've started wars over women. She's my girl. No, she's mine. Let's start a world war.
Right, Helen from Troy. You're saying, right?
That's what I'm saying. Is like we've started wars over our egos. So it's what we do. It's because it's funny.
So would you start a war over your woman? You're alive.
No,
you're alive.
But point being is it's ironic because that's the point of Bitcoin in a sense. Well, not in a sense. That's the point of Bitcoin, which is it takes the human error and the human flaw out of it, right? So a monetary system is not brand new. We've had it since the beginning of time, or at least thousands of years, a monetary system. Yet, why is Bitcoin important? Why did Bitcoin play such a huge role? Because it meets the need of going against what humans do. Right? Monetary policy, wanting to have fiscal responsibility is a great idea, and it's what we always intend. But humans get to doing what humans do. We either cause a war we got to pay for, or we need to overspend in this, or whatever it is, and we can never, by being human, stay within that monetary policy. And so Bitcoin, to me, is monetary policy put into a computer code. It's a perfect monetary policy that can't be messed with because it doesn't allow you to. And it's funny that kind of the king daddy of the whole crypto exchanges right now is making such a human move using something that's there to cure humans.
I
mean, it's ironic at best.
I think, so by the way, when my hair's all that jacked up, feel free to tell me something because, my hair was a mess. And because you don't have hair, I'm just saying, okay, you got to tell a boy.
Sorry, man.
Because I just looked, I was like, what?
I thought that maybe that's your style, dude.
No. So here's something to think about. If let's say you go back 200, 300 years, right? Let's go back 150 years. Before the banks really took root, you would work your farm or work on a farm or whatever, and you would make a wage, and that would be paid to you in gold and silver, copper, nickel, whatever. You would use that as a medium of exchange. For the most part, you were wary of taking it to what we call now banks. Back then, they used to call them coin dealers, right? Exchanges, all right? And so they would go there, and then the exchange would write paper and like an IOU, and you would get that. Instead of carrying around your gold, you would go to the local merchants. They would accept that. Well, that's how this whole banking system started to happen. But a run would happen to these gold exchangers, these money lenders. What would happen is the money lenders would start taking the money out and buying assets, right? Buying more land so they can produce, basically looking for interest, more interest. But then the rumor would start, right, that they were doing that, and there would be a run. A run would be just a whole bunch of people coming in, hey, here's your IOUs.
At the same time.
I want
my money at the same time. Yes.
Well, what would happen then, there was justice, because if that lender couldn't pay back everybody, they would lynch your ass.
He was dealt with.
He was dealt with.
Yes.
And that was a society where your work was duly compensated, okay? And you can store value. And a lot of people confuse gold and silver as the store of value because it's been around for so long. What people don't understand is, and I agree that it is a store of value. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not disreferring you gold bugs. I love gold. I have gold, right? But my point is, it was the justice behind the gold, and that made it an important thing. I mean, not only the mining, and we could talk about that and how hard it was to get gold and silver. We could talk about that.
But at the end, what protected it all was what you're talking about.
The people.
The people.
The people. Well, now what the bankers, now a few hundred years later, what have they done? This is what they've done. They've decided to get off any kind of standard to basically confuse the citizenry, and that's what's happened. So people, as long as they're getting their money, right, and they can buy goods and services, then they're not worried about their money being printed into oblivion.
They don't question it.
So we just talked about something very important. You got all these crypto banks that went under. We didn't talk about Republic. We talked about Signature. We talked about SVB, and we talked about Silvergate. But we didn't talk about Republic or all that. But one thing people fail to notice or choose not to, and it's been hushed by the media, is where did the banks get the money to cover all these people that they made whole? Where? Do you know?
Government.
You think it was the government?
Who was it?
What they did was they got for the most part, they got with the Federal Reserve, and they basically said, hey, look, cover this, and what we're going to do is we're going to get more fees out of our clients to pay for this. And that's a very, very loose translation. Okay, you could go in deep in that. But so all of a sudden, you look in the Federal Reserve, and you see that they started demonetizing their portfolios. It was selling everything. And, you see this trend that's going straight down, which was good for us, believe it or not. Then all of a sudden, we have this huge spike a month or two ago, and we're talking in the hundreds of billions now. So we went like this, and then all of a sudden, we went straight back up. And there's a chart that I saw on Twitter, and I suppose I could put it in the comments below.
There you go.
All right. But that chart shows where our Federal Reserve is basically bailing out all these banks and all these people without, I would assume, doing it unlawfully. And in other words, I think this should have gone to Congress, right? I think for them to do a workaround that they did, they shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, so they did.
Where are these? You know what? Billions of dollars.
Well, think about this. As an overall premise, all the banks right now couldn't handle a bank run. Any bank. Whereas if all the members of that bank were to come and show up at the front steps of that bank at the exact same time and say, all we merely want back are our deposits. Banks couldn't even provide that. Think about that. And that's because of the reserved fractional banking that they have, which is I go to a bank and I give them $1,000. The second they receive that $1,000, the government says, bank, you can loan $10,000 from that $1,000.
It's actually $33,000.
Okay.
It's a 33.
Okay. Well, point being is like a candy bar, right? I have a candy bar and you say, let me borrow that. So I lend you the candy bar. You take that candy bar. You lend it to Joe. Joe takes that candy bar, lends it to Steve. Steve takes that candy bar, lends it to John. So now we've got 5 candy bars in the system, but there's really only one candy bar.
Right.
So if one person comes in to get his candy bar, cool. But what if all 5 show up to get their candy bar? There's only one candy bar.
Yeah.
That's how our fractional reserve banking system is set up.
Yeah.
People need to understand that.
Yep.
And so that's how a lot of their money is made and worth. So if you can't even have the basic customers of your bank come in and get the money back that they gave you to lend out, you can't even cover that minimum layer one of that.
Right.
That explains our banking system in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, what you have right now is you got this dichotomy that is starting to fray at the edges. You've got all these different world organizations that are starting to rebel against our globalist agenda.
Yep.
So we have
Let's take BRICS.
We have BRICS coming on one side, but on the other side, you have Russia and China doing their own deal, and you've got the Arab nations pretty much doing their own deal. And I don't know if you remember.
Then you've got France and China
well, France,
doing their natural gas trade.
Yeah, France has been on the wrong side of history on this one. You know what? I love the French, but what? How about this? I like the French. I don't know if I love the French, but I do like the French. And
they're tolerable.
Right.
Just kidding.
Right. But here's
most sense.
Yeah. What people don't take into consideration is looking at all these pieces is why would the bankers want to control crypto? And why would they want to put on all these different things? Let me give you an example. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get my thoughts together here, bro. But think about it this way. If you're a banker, you want to keep the game afoot. You want to just keep going. You don't want it to end.
Yeah.
And you're looking at crypto. Crypto is a major threat. It's a huge threat. If they can actually do what the white paper said of Bitcoin and do a peer-to-peer, that brings us back into full circle of what happened a few hundred years ago where we controlled our own money, right? And we can exchange peer-to-peer. So in other words, I got a gold piece and I went to you and I bought a hammer, right? And you gave me the change, peer-to-peer. Where Bitcoin represents a big threat for them. All right, so they're either wanting to take it down, okay, and I'm using Bitcoin as altcoins, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, either they want to bring it down, or they want to own it. Okay, so the question is, if you can print money at infinitum like they can, why wouldn't they buy all the Bitcoin in existence?
that's my whole point, which is, if the government can literally print as much money as they want, in a sense, okay, why wouldn't they just print all the money they could and buy all the Bitcoin that they could? Because it was all bought with not real money anyways, because they printed it. So who cares if the American dollar goes to zero someday if you have literally all the Bitcoin that you bought with that money that's now worthless? Who cares? Now you own the Bitcoin. So I've thought that many times, is like, I don't understand. You know what? They probably are, man. They probably are.
Well, how do they?
Let's get real.
Yeah,
they probably
but
are.
How do they buy it without the price going parabolic?
Cost dollar average.
Well, that's just it.
So that, and what did we do for gold for a bunch of years? We get the world's gold after World War II for the Bretton Woods. And that's because we basically had the majority of the gold stored in the United States anyways. So we take everyone's gold and then we basically disseminate it out. And in order for us, between like 1944, I think it was, and 1971, before we went off the gold standard with Nixon, was us basically taking the gold that we had and selling it at a discount to all these who happen to be a lot of the third world countries, some of them in the BRICS, who are buying this gold over the decades at a discount. Why? Because if we sold gold as a discount, it made the US dollar keep strong, right? Our US dollar's only competition was gold. So if you devalue gold as you sell it, then you keep your American dollar strong because the only competition, you're devaluing it for years and years and years. However, you've allowed decades and decades and decades of these other countries, mostly third world countries, to grab up this gold, and they're not selling it back. Yep. So combine that with them embracing Bitcoin, or El Salvador not only making it their national currency, but mining it from a frickin' volcano and not only creating it for their national currency, but being able to create their own, in a sense, because they're mining Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like, combine that with the gold that we've been getting over decades and decades and decades, it's catching up.
You saw J.P. Morgan Chase. They got in trouble, paid a couple $100 million, I think, or more, $250 million, in a fine because they were found to have manipulated the price of silver.
Yes.
Okay. So what you're saying is backed historically. It's true. And this just happened last year, I think it was.
Yeah, I read like 10 articles on this of the gold and the discount. That's how I know. Like, I can tell that 100% for a fact.
Yeah, I know. It is. And now, the reason I asked the question is it's a good setup question to this segue. And this is the segue. If they can't just turn around and buy all the Bitcoin, because what will happen is at first you're buying Bitcoin at $30,000. The second Bitcoin that you buy will be just a little bit more. Mm-hmm. The 100,000th Bitcoin now is going to be a lot more. And as you're going up, the price goes up exponentially. You cannot buy all the Bitcoin because you will be broke. At the end, if you try to buy all this
But
Bitcoin,
if you print all the money out of nowhere, you can buy a lot of it.
Yeah, you can. But
so who cares if you're paying 70 grand or 20
you're
grand?
You're going to make too many people too wealthy.
Yeah, that's true.
So what's your best case? You pass legislation to try to get people to sell their coin.
Yeah.
Right? You bankrupt exchanges to buy the coin.
Force their hand and slow them down. That's what you do.
Yeah. So, what was it? Like 2 days ago or a day ago, I was watching a YouTuber, and he was talking about how a sovereign fund out of Africa has been buying Bitcoin and Ethereum, okay, for years now, through a sovereign wealth fund that they created. All right, because they've seen that whole possibility of what Bitcoin can be. So if you've got undercover, in other words, that told me that there's a lot of governments or companies picking this stuff up, but on the down low. That tells me that their goal is actually to devalue Bitcoin, right? So they can buy as much as they can. And even if they buy as much as they can. So right now, we're going to have 21 million done, end of story. But we probably have about 2 million or
well, here's the thing.
They're not even
to mine the last 2 million that are left will take another 150 years at this rate. I mean, not factoring if we have quantum computers come into play and all that stuff. But as of right now, it would take another 150 years to mine the very last Bitcoin, and there's only 2 million left.
Wow.
So
because of all the halving?
Yeah, because of the halving and the algorithm, right? So every time that you verify a Bitcoin transaction, you get rewarded the block for your reward for the energy and time to do that. But every time that mathematical equation gets solved, the next one becomes even harder to solve.
Yeah, yeah.
So as they get created, it becomes harder and harder and harder. So the algorithm will be so hard to create a new Bitcoin by the time we get to like 20,600,000, whatever it is, that it's literally going to take that long. I mean, but that's not, figuring in if quantum computers come into play and this and that.
Well, even if quantum computers do come into play and they mine all the Bitcoin, the problem they're going to have is that the Bitcoin's price is going to be stupid. There's like
that's the thing.
100 million Satoshi for every Bitcoin. So this could be a global change.
That's what I'm saying, which is everyone wants to get caught up on, well, Bitcoin goes up and goes down and what gives the price of Bitcoin. And I say, you know, when you're talking about market in a sense of right now with Bitcoin, you're talking about markets. And every financial market is susceptible to this and that and this. The difference that Bitcoin has that none of these other have is you will only ever be able to create 21 million.
Yeah.
That's the difference. The decentralization and the fact that the supply and demand is locked in. There will only ever be 20. So I don't care if it gets manipulated along the way. Of course, people with more money are going to use the market. Of course, that's what humans do. But what humans can never do is create more than 21 million. And that's a huge, probably most important factor.
Now, none of this, by the way, is financial advice. This is just me and mine, and I'm sure Brett feels the same. But at the end of the day, there's a puzzle that we're going to help you solve. And stay tuned because we got more of this coming up. So I'm going to give you the last word there, birthday boy. So what, you want to leave this?
No, I mean, I appreciate everyone watching. This is our new podcast. Pedro and I have many, many, many thoughts on blockchain, crypto, lending, banking, everything in between. So as you kind of said before, it's our job to kind of unpack it and unravel it all and put the pieces together so you can kind of see the big picture.
All right. Well, thank you and see you.